The head of a super large cargo forwarding company, which ranks among the world's top 5 in cargo volume on the Asia US route, pointed out tonight, third, that the reciprocal tariffs announced by Trump are much higher than expected. As a result, the company has received notifications from foreign stations that many Chinese shipments, which have already been loaded, are requesting to cancel exports. Several companies in Vietnam also reported today that they have canceled shipments. It is estimated that a large number of exports to the U.S. will be canceled in the coming days. The container shipping market has been severely impacted. Now, everything depends on whether Trump's visit to the mainland at the end of April can bring a breakthrough. The company noted that Vietnam initially estimated the tariffs to be between 25 to 30%, but they unexpectedly reached as high as 46%. At this point, the only option is to suspend shipments. The company has instructed its Asian stations to investigate how the top 15 local customers plan to respond to the tariffs. Current estimates suggest that cargo volume will decline by 30% to 40%, and market freight rates will inevitably drop significantly. However, shipping companies have also aggressively cut flights. On the U.S. East Coast route, 2 weekly flights have been reduced to 1, and another 2 weekly flights have been cut to 1 every other week. The chairman of another non-listed OTC cargo collection company with annual revenue in the tens of billions stated that the impact of reciprocal tariffs is expected to be significant. The company's internal discussions indicate that, although Trump has announced tariff rates for various countries, specific implementation details remain unclear. The current situation is chaotic, and customers cannot respond in time. Some shipments may need to be temporarily adjusted as a coping measure. For goods already at sea, U.S. importers are expected to suffer heavy losses. A period of significantly reduced shipments on the U.S. route is anticipated until the new trade rules take shape. The chairman believes that supply chain adjustments are no longer the main concern, as so many countries are now subject to tariffs that manufacturers have nowhere to relocate. Thailand's tariff rate is 37%, Taiwan and Indonesia's are 32%, India's is 27%, South Korea's is 26%, Japan's is 24%, and Mexico's is relatively low at 20%. However, the U.S. has required Mexico to impose a 25% tariff on mainland goods and enforce strict penalties against origin laundering, making it difficult to circumvent the tariffs. The new annual long-term contract for the U.S. route is set to begin in May, coinciding with the implementation of reciprocal tariffs. Super large cargo companies estimate that for up to 7 months this year, spot market freight rates may fall below the fixed contract rates, leading to a significant decline in container shipping companies' profits. Sinopac Investment Consulting estimates that revenue from the North American routes accounts for 42%, 38%, and 29% of Evergreen, Yang Ming, and Wanhai's earnings, respectively. Trump's series of heavy blows have brought disaster to China's economy, forcing companies into a life-and-death test. On April 2nd, U.S. President Donald Trump announced at the White House that he would impose reciprocal tariffs on trading partners, applying different tariff rates to all of them. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that the tariff on China has been raised from 20% to 34%. This means that once these tariffs take effect, the total tariff on Chinese goods will reach 54%. Bloomberg reported that this move could deal a severe blow to China's exports to the United States. Most of the $525 billion worth of goods exported by Chinese companies to the U.S. in 2024 will be affected. For years, other countries have grown rich and powerful, mostly at our expense, while hardworking American citizens have been forced to sit on the sidelines, Trump said at an event in the White House Rose Garden. But now it's our turn to prosper. He cited China as an example, saying he respected the country but insisted that it had taken great advantage of the U.S. I said, hey, if you can get away with it, then we'll see, Trump remarked, implying that high tariffs on Chinese goods would be difficult to circumvent. Institutional forecasts China's exports to the U.S. could drop by 90%, economic growth cut in half. According to previous estimates by Bloomberg Economics, a 54% tariff on Chinese goods could cause China's exports to the U.S. to decline by 90% by 2030. Macquarie Group has stated that if the tariff rate reaches 60%, China's gross domestic product (GDP) growth could shrink by 2 percentage points. UBS predicts that such a tariff level could cut China's annual economic growth rate in half. These forecasts were all published last year. The White House clarified that the reciprocal tariffs announced on Wednesday are additional tariffs and do not replace any existing tariffs, fees, or taxes except for specific exemptions. The administration emphasized that previous tariff policies on China will remain in effect. The executive order stated that the president had issued a new order on Chinese goods on April 2, 2025, and that all prior tariff rates on the affected goods would still apply. Additionally, the White House announced that to prevent transshipment and tax evasion, all tariffs imposed on goods from mainland China under this executive order, or any future orders, will also apply to goods from Hong Kong and Macau. Furthermore, on April 2nd, President Trump signed an executive order eliminating the small package tax exemption for goods from mainland China and Hong Kong valued below $800, effective 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time on May 2, 2025. According to the order, all relevant mail items, including goods sent through the International Postal Network that are valued at $800 or less and meet minimum duty-free conditions, will be subject to a tariff of 30% of their value, or $25 per item. This tariff will increase to $50 per item starting June 1, 2025. Onshore RMB falls below 7.3. Mainland media outlet Caixin reported that in the early morning of April 3, Beijing time, Trump announced that tariffs would be imposed on global trading partners to varying degrees. So far, his policy has raised tariffs on China to 54%. As a result, the RMB exchange rate plunged at market open, depreciating by nearly 0.4%. The onshore RMB, CNY, fell to 7.3060 and closed at 7.3043, marking its lowest closing price since February 12th. Meanwhile, the offshore RMB, CNH, dropped to 7.3476, its weakest level since early February. The central parity rate was set at 7.1889, down 96 points, hitting its lowest level in more than 2.5 months. The deviation from Reuters' forecast narrowed to around 650 points. Market participants noted that moving forward, attention should be given to whether the central parity rate will drop below the key 7.2 CNY threshold. Regarding Trump's newly announced tariff measures, Chinese authorities on Thursday urged the U.S. to cancel them immediately. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce stated that it would take retaliatory actions to defend the country's rights and interests. Late Thursday, the Chinese Communist Party condemned the U.S. 25% tariff on the auto industry as intimidation. However, Beijing stated that it would maintain communication with Washington on trade and economic issues. Amid the sharp tariff hike on China, rating agency Fitch downgraded China's sovereign credit rating. In a report released on April 3rd, Fitch announced its decision to lower China's sovereign credit rating from A+ to A. Officials from China's Ministry of Finance expressed deep regret and strong disapproval of the decision. Chinese exporters face a life-or-death test. On April 2nd, that Trump has imposed tariffs on Chinese goods one after another, and a new round of tariffs will be introduced this week, putting Chinese exporters to a life-or-death test. A toy factory in Dongguan, Guangdong Province, China, has received fewer orders this year. Many of its customers are based in the United States. Regarding the hesitation of American customers, Ms. Liao, 33, who runs the factory with her brother, said, "There is nothing we can do, and it may be even more hopeless. I don't know what the next quarter will bring." Currently, exports are the only engine of growth for China's economy. In 2024, China's foreign trade surplus is expected to exceed 7 trillion CNY. An American customer of Ms. Liao, who sells toy dolls based on characters from books, recently asked her to reduce prices by 20%, a request Ms. Liao said she could not meet. She produces goods with a profit margin of 30%, which provides her with a buffer against fluctuations in production materials and labor costs. Ms. Liao explained that a 20% price cut would eliminate most of her profits, making it difficult for the factory to remain operational. Nevertheless, refusing the customer is not easy. The customer ordered 25,000 dolls last year, one of the largest single orders Ms. Liao has ever received. She mentioned that the total number of orders this year has decreased by nearly 30%. According to a report by Taiwan media New Head Shell on April 1st, the Xianzhong incident in Chinese society has resurfaced, with incidents of revenge against society occurring in Henan and Beijing. The resurgence of the Xianzhong incident is closely tied to the CCP's disregard for people's livelihoods. Today, China's economy is struggling, and real estate continues to decline. The Wall Street Journal quoted data released by CRIC on April 1st, reporting that the top
3 common misconceptions about China's economy. Common misconceptions about China's economy include the ideas that one should never bet against China, that new industries will drive China's growth, and that a massive stimulus plan could resolve its economic issues. However, a former Beijing political advisor suggests these beliefs are deeply flawed. On Monday, December 2nd, Desmond Shum, author of Red Roulette and a former member of the Beijing Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or CPPCC, outlined these misconceptions on the social media platform X. Misconception 1: Never bet against China. This notion has gained traction over the years as China's rapid economic growth seemed to defy skeptics. Shum argues that this belief assumes that past trends guarantee future outcomes, ignoring fundamental shifts in China's economy, politics, and global environment. He writes, betting against China during the era of reform and opening up, when favorable demographics, global economic integration, and easy gains were available, is vastly different from doing so today, as many tailwinds have turned into headwinds. He adds, the assumption that history progresses in a straight line is entirely misguided. Misconception 2: New industries will sustain strong growth. Beijing has frequently touted the so-called new 3 industries, electric vehicles, EVs, lithium-ion batteries, and solar panels, as proof of China's innovation and future growth. While these sectors have grown impressively, Shum points out they still represent only a small fraction of China's economy, accounting for less than 10% of its GDP. Meanwhile, broader economic indicators are less promising. 2 of China's 3 growth engines, investment and domestic consumption, are shrinking, he notes. He argues that it's wishful thinking to believe these emerging industries can offset the structural decline in real estate and its associated wealth effects. The math simply doesn't add up. Misconception 3: A large-scale stimulus plan can save China's economy. This belief stems from memories of Beijing's massive stimulus plan in 2008 to 2009, which helped China weather the global financial crisis. But the current circumstances are vastly different. China's growth model, built on continuous investment, cheap labor, and export dominance, has reached its limits, Shum explains. Domestically, China is overinvested, overleveraged, and constrained by Xi Jinping's return to centralized control, which evokes the Mao era. Internationally, the geopolitical environment has changed, with previously favorable conditions like unrestricted access to Western markets and global supply chains no longer guaranteed, he writes. Shum highlights stark figures. China accounts for about 1/3 of global manufacturing and 14% of global exports, while the U.S., the second largest manufacturer, produces 16% of global goods and 7% of exports. However, China's export-driven model is facing mounting global resistance. As global demand weakens and Western nations actively diversify supply chains, China's manufacturing sector is struggling. Stimulus measures may provide temporary relief but cannot resolve structural challenges, Shum warns. These misconceptions persist because they allow observers to believe China's economic juggernaut will continue indefinitely, much like the past few decades. But reality is more complex and sobering, Shum concludes. China's economic challenges are structural and deeply rooted, and oversimplified narratives are often misleading. China's economic chaos. Gao Shanwen's speech goes viral online. An economist has publicly highlighted the chaos in China's economy, noting that massive unemployment has caused young people in China to lose their consumption vitality. Data indicates that provinces with younger populations are experiencing slower consumption growth, while those with older populations are seeing faster growth. Gao Shanwen, chief economist at Guotai Securities, shared his analysis of provincial data during an investor conference in Shenzhen on Tuesday, December 3rd. He revealed that a cumulative total of 47 million Chinese workers nationwide are unable to find regular employment. According to calculations by Bloomberg using official statistics, this equates to 10% of China's urban workforce in 2023. Gao's remarks quickly gained attention on Chinese social media, including Weibo, and became a hot topic on international platforms such as X, formerly Twitter. Publishing this article must not have been easy, commented a Chinese mainland netizen on a portal site about the speech. This analysis based on data is accurate, it's an excellent report, another netizen replied. In recent years, Chinese authorities have increasingly suppressed public skepticism of economic activity. In August 2021, the Cyberspace Administration of China prohibited social media posts that distort and misinterpret macroeconomic data. In some cases, economists have been directly warned not to criticize official data. Several domestic platforms broadcast Gao's public speech, where he described post-pandemic Chinese society in three striking phrases: thriving elders, lifeless youth, and disenchanted middle-aged. Gao's candid remarks stand out amid a broader backdrop where analysts are pressured to align with the government's narrative of optimism and economic growth. Since Beijing lifted COVID restrictions in 2022, retail sales in China have remained sluggish. Consumer confidence has been hit hard by pandemic measures in one of the country's worst real estate crises. The economic slowdown, coupled with widespread pay cuts and layoffs, has strained household budgets and suppressed spending. Gao noted that recent consumption trends reflect the reality that retirees' pension incomes remain stable, while young people face bleak employment prospects. We tend to think that post-pandemic, young people drive home buying. In regions where young people are less optimistic about the future, consumption weakens, and the desire to buy homes also declines, he said. In contrast, older adults' income expectations are not constrained, and their sense of happiness remains strong. Gao observed that before the pandemic, consumption growth was roughly on par with economic growth or even slightly faster. However, post-pandemic, consumption growth has lagged significantly behind economic growth. Based on pre-pandemic data, either consumption growth has been underestimated, or economic growth has been overestimated, as this mismatch isn't evident in other indicators, he explained. If we trust employment data, economic growth is overstated. Conversely, if economic growth data is reliable, employment data must be understated, Gao said. The relationship between employment and growth has appeared highly abnormal over the past 2 years. In terms of employment, Gao estimates that 47 million workers in urban areas are unable to find jobs, according to cumulative deviations from employment trend lines. In other words, a total of 47 million Chinese workers are effectively unable to secure regular jobs. Based on Bloomberg's calculations using official statistics, this equates to 10% of China's urban workforce last year. This figure highlights gaps or deliberate omissions in China's official urban employment statistics. Despite consistently stable official unemployment rates, a significant number of workers have returned to rural hometowns or taken on gig jobs like ride-hailing, which are excluded from official statistics. Other independent analyses also suggest that China's job market is weaker than official data suggests. In 2023, the National Bureau of Statistics of China stopped disclosing youth unemployment data after months of record-high rates. Subsequent indicators excluded students from the calculation but still showed persistently high unemployment rates. Gao estimates that China's GDP growth over the past 3 years may have been overstated by 10 percentage points. This conclusion is based on his analysis of discrepancies between economic growth data and expansion in areas like consumption, investment, and labor force. In China, the most reliable macroeconomic data is price-related, as it's harder to manipulate through sampling. Other data is less reliable and more susceptible to non-statistical factors, Gao noted. He suggested that adjusting China's economic growth rate downward by 3 percentage points per year would align the data with reality. Other economists have also questioned the accuracy of the Chinese government's GDP growth figures for 2022 and 2023. Tao Jingzhou, a classmate of former Premier Li Keqiang at Peking University, has publicly criticized the credibility of official statistics. Tao, an international arbitrator and attorney at the French Court of Appeals, said that misleading data creates a cycle of misinformation. In an op-ed for the Financial Times, Tao argued that Beijing's strict control over economic data, especially annual GDP figures, undermines their credibility. He also pointed out that the Chinese government's attempts to silence economists about GDP figures have backfired, as jokes about GDP data have become more common in private conversations than ever before. Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. We will keep reporting on the COVID surge in China, so don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to get the latest videos. And thank you for tuning in.